It's a brand new year, 2016. Everyone's filled with optimism. They feel good. They're ready for the next step to see where they go. Marriages, children, degrees, jobs, future. And then I come in and interrupt that. Welcome to the Ramble On, everyone. I am your host. My name is Kevin. I'm all by myself today. There's no joke, there's no interlude. I'm literally by myself. No one else wanted to swing by and throw down a quick recording, which is cool. I like talking to myself anyway. I usually do. If you know me or see me or have had any experience with me and you see me just standing there staring off into space, just assume that I'm having a full-on conversation with myself. They say that you are your own best company, and I must say that I'm not, but nobody else wants to hang out with me, so here we are. Marvin is doing stuff, Omar is non-existent, and I don't want Ernie on my podcast, so there you go. These guys aren't going to listen to it. I guess I do have some companionship. I have a snake next to me. She'll probably hiss and slither and fill me with fear. And then my big dumb cat is sitting on my lap, at least giving me some sort of company and reassurance that I'm not completely by myself. But then he'll look at me like the big slow dumb that he is and remind me that I'm talking to a white and black wall. We've been MIA for a few weeks, and, as the holidays come, everybody has families. Usually people have families that come into town. Nicole and I usually just kind of keep to ourselves down here in San Antonio, but we were fortunate enough to have her family in town, and it was a good trip. It was a nice trip. It was great to usher in a new era of holiday here in our new house. So that was a good time. New Year's was a blast, and I don't know what Marvin did. I'm sure he had a good time too. But, everybody had a nice relaxing holiday. The timing didn't work out. So that is what it is. I know that moving forward with the Ramble On, I know that me and the guys do want to get together and do a big Star Wars review. Since our last podcast was all about reminding everyone that it was Star Wars when we went and saw it, we want to take the time to have a discussion about it. Probably a little spoilery when we talk about it. It has been it'll be almost a month by the time we talk about it. So I figure, and with the money that it's making, I figure people have seen this movie. Those that haven't, just know that it's good. It's a great movie. It's a lot of fun. I've seen it a few times already. I know Marv's seen it a few times already. That's the movie it's the trilogy of our childhood that we grew up on. It's the trilogy of a lot of people's childhood. So naturally, we'll want to have a more thorough discussion about that later when I actually have someone to bounce off of. A few things today, though, just to give my opinions about, I don't see this being longer than 30 to 40 minutes. Yes, I can talk that long. Don't be surprised when you look at the amount of time that you have to sit here and listen to me. There's a lot of good stuff that's coming out right now. A lot of good movies that are coming out right now. This is the awards season when everyone waits to save their quality films, and not to say that there aren't good movies from, well, let's say March, because usually January and February, they're just trying to get their shit out to make as much as they can. Right now, everyone's running into the monster that is Star Wars. The movie's been out for 20 days and it's already made a wicked amount of money, and anything that it goes up against, you're just assuming that it's not going to defeat Star Wars for quite some time. Michael Bay has a movie coming out in January. Kevin Hart and Ice Cube have their sequel. What else are you going to see? There's not much else out there that people really want to see outside of Star Wars. And not to say that people don't want to see dumb schlock. That's fine. Me, I'd prefer to see something worth my time. By the way, 13 Days by Michael Bay, or whatever the movie's called, comes out next weekend. So if you want to see 2 hours of shit blowing up, head to your cinemas and give Michael Bay your money, because I'm sure that he would appreciate it. Not that he doesn't have enough. 13 Hours by Michael Bay, excuse me. One of those movies that a lot of people were excited to see, and one that was kind of under the radar for most of the year. Everyone knew that it was coming out. Everyone knew who was in it. The Big Short, directed by Adam McKay. Everybody was excited when they saw the cast. When you see Christian Bale and Ryan Gosling and Brad Pitt and Steve Carell. The cast list attracted a lot of people to see this movie, and for good reason. It's based on the book by Michael Lewis about the economic crash of 2008. That affected the entire world because of these big banks getting a little sneaky, aka fraudulent, with the subprime mortgage loans, the different mortgage loans that they were offering to potential homeowners. These people could not afford their homes, but these banks, they were giving mortgages out to people willy-nilly, like it was no big deal. Long story short, obviously, we're in the situation that we're in now, still recovering 7 years later after the fall of not only our economy, but you have countries like Greece that still haven't recovered. They're still struggling. complete disarray. And then we all can thank China. Thanks, China, for all the money that you've given us. The Big Short gives a fun cinematic look at, fun's the wrong word, but it gives a cinematic look at what we all went through. You know, what we were watching on the TV, the guys behind the scenes that were trying to make it more known to the general world what was happening to their homes, what was happening to their money, what was happening to the dollar. It's a big deal. It affected all of us, but like they pointed out throughout the movie, everyone was more worried about where Lindsay Lohan was going for rehab, Barry Bonds and his steroid allegations. There were smaller things that people were focusing on that were being hyped up as bigger than what they actually were, as we were watching our country completely fold in on itself. It was interesting the way that Adam McKay did it. It's very much in the same realm as Wolf of Wall Street. The way that it was filmed, the way that it was done, the performances are as top-notch. They break the fourth wall a lot more than Leo DiCaprio, which was cool to see because they understood that what they were talking about is not interesting to a lot of people. On a budget of just under $30 million, I think they've doubled that by now. There are people that want to know about this, that want to watch this movie and kind of learn a little bit more with familiar faces. You know, people that they recognize from their favorite movies or TV shows. They want to get the chance to see some of what happened or get a closer look, a more cinematic look at what happened in 2008 that affected us so harshly. It makes it more accessible to people. Being able to go into a movie about CDOs and subprime mortgages and AAA and AA, double B, you know, all that stuff. I have no idea what I just said. I have no idea what I'm talking about, which is pretty sad considering that I'm trying to go get my MBA this summer. I really should do my research. Adam McKay brings to this movie is that he's done movies like Step Brothers and Anchorman, and so he knows how to sell those funnier moments that might be in this movie, but at the same time, he really elevated himself as a director and kind of stretched himself to take on something a little bigger than what he's done before. No one would think that the guy who directed Anchorman and the subsequent sequel, Anchorman 2, would take on such an important movie, if you will. If you think about it, this is one of the more important films of the past several years because it's so relevant to where we are. And of course, there are documentaries about the crash of 2008. Not to diminish their importance because I think they are important. It's just I haven't had the chance to see them. It was great to see Adam McKay kind of take the opportunity to expand himself out of just doing comedies. Him and Charles Randolph adapted Michael Lewis's book to portray this movie. And the best thing about this movie is that they say right off, this is based on a true story. But compared to other quote-unquote based on true stories, they're a little breaking of the fourth wall to talk to you directly about what really happened. You know, how two of the characters, Charles and Jamie, they're trying to make money. They just don't have enough invested funds, or they don't have enough capital through their investors to really make it with one of the bigger firms, which is understandable. You know, they want to make their money. They don't have enough to earn. When they're meeting with JP Morgan Chase and they find Ryan Gosling's Jordan Burnett, the document about taking out fund swaps for these eventual failed subprime mortgage loans and all that stuff, they find it on a coffee table where they were waiting in the lobby. Now, Finn Wittrock, who played Dandy from American Horror Story Freak Show, he looks at the camera and says, "This is not how it really happened. How it really happened was Charlie was looking at this, he was reading this article, and I was on the internet, I found this, and that's how we eventually came into it. But for cinematic reasons, we're doing it this way." It was a nice tongue-in-cheek moment to have. They changed it for the movie, but they're keeping it somewhat consistent with what they found and how they found it. Randolph and McKay definitely had their finger on the pulse of how to get people to pay attention. One of the first discussions between Ryan Gosling's Burnett and Steve Carell's Mark Baum about these pending failing mortgages, they're like, well, let's go to Margot Robbie in a bathtub drinking champagne to give it to you in layman's terms. Not many people are going to understand, except for people in the business. They're not going to understand what they're talking about. To help idiots like me, who have no idea what they're talking about, they get a beautiful actress wearing bubbles and drinking champagne to tell me what's going on. They do that throughout the movie, which I think gives it a real fun touch. This movie is not fun if you think about what they're discussing, though, what they're seeing and who they're talking to. You get a harsh reality when two of Steve Carell's brokers go to Florida to try and figure out what's going on down there, and they meet a family that's living in a house that probably cost almost $1 million. They're renting a house that costs a lot of money, and to be stereotypical, because that's where they went. I mean, they laid this one on thick, but you have a big guy with tattoos. He doesn't look like he has a job, but he's renting a house. Technically, he wouldn't afford otherwise. So they laid that part on thick, but you just see kind of what they're talking about, how they're just giving out loans and mortgages to anybody who fills out the paperwork. Max Greenfield from New Girl, he plays a mortgage broker in the movie and basically says that if they fill out the paperwork, the company I work for, they're not going to care if they don't have the finances or if they don't have a job. All they want is just for us to set it up and push it through. It's kind of depressing. You know, there are a lot of sad, depressing movies. Marvin and I have talked about Blue Valentine starring Ryan Gosling and Michelle Williams because you're watching the just complete tearing down of a marriage. Or you watch 12 Years a Slave, where you see no hope for a free black man. You know, there are movies like that about the human condition, the human spirit. But there's something that tears down the human spirit even more, and that's not having any money. Not being able to live, or living out of your car, or living in a tent in the middle of a field. Having the cops tell you to get the hell out of there is gut-wrenching and harder to deal with than what some of these other movies deal with. Honestly, these guys are the bad guys. We know these guys are the bad guys. The only quote-unquote good guy that might be in the movie is Christian Bale's Michael Burry. He's the one who 3-4 years before anything even happened, he saw it all coming. He goes to all these banks and he invests against the mortgage stability, which everyone just kind of laughs about. They're like, awesome, we're in the money. This guy's his investors are gonna owe us billions. Only for it to turn around, to hit them in the face, and for Christian Bale and his investors to make a lot of money. The rest of them, they all are in that business. You know, you watch them and it's sad that you're rooting for the bad guy in this movie. It's something very similar to a movie I'll discuss for a minute here later, The Hateful Eight, that you're rooting for the bad guys. Just because there are guys that are worse than them doesn't mean that we're still not rooting for the bad guys. These are the guys that fucked us all over for years. They're still fucking us over, by the way. I've given you a pretty long rundown. I have to say, this is easily one of my favorite movies of the year. As much as I enjoyed it, as we got to the end of the movie, I just found myself getting sadder and sadder, getting close to tears, just thinking about all those families and all those lives that were damaged. You know, because it was real. It was real life. It wasn't just the fun pulpiness of a Tarantino movie that you know it's all bullshit. These are real people that did this. And I think that's what makes this such a depressing movie. Technically, performance-wise, all that stuff is great. But that's the mark of a great movie, is that it can make you feel something when otherwise you probably wouldn't. I think it opens your eyes to what was, what is, and what will continue to go on in the country. So that's something to think about. It's not going to stop, so all you can hope for is that people kind of open their eyes a little bit more and try and stop it. Your votes count, people. I probably won't vote, but you know, they do count. I think Christian Bale, without question, stole the show. The Golden Globes are tomorrow night. Matt Damon will win for The Martian. If you go back to episode 2 or 3 when we talked about The Martian, and I said that movie would continue to move down my list as I saw more movies, and lo and behold, it's not even close to my top 20 right now. You can listen to my thoughts on that movie if you want, back in episode 2 or 3. This movie deserves all the recognition that it's getting. It deserves all the praise. Christian Bale especially, I think, deserves a couple more gold statues to add to his collection, because I thought he was just absolutely outstanding. It was nice to see Ryan Gosling back. I know he took some time off to make a movie, Lost River, which didn't seem like it did too well. Wrote, directed it, and everything. Brad Pitt's fine. Steve Carell's great. The supporting cast, you know, you got, like I said, Whitrock and Greenfield and Karen Gillan from Doctor Who and Marissa Tomei. You have a lot of people that pop up that do their part well. It's not just, you don't get the sense that it's a blow-off part. They understand. Adepero Odoye, she was in a movie called Pariah, which I highly recommend people check out. It's a wonderful movie. It's like Precious, but optimistic. Precious built itself to be a sad, depressing story. Pariah, in and of itself, is a fairly sad story, but Odoye is brilliant in that movie. I highly recommend checking out Pariah. But her in this role, she played a foil to Steve Carell, and they have good chemistry. So she's one to mention. But overall, Great cast, great movie. If you can see it soon. It'll be in theaters for a while because of the award season. The sooner you can get to it. And I saw it today, so of course I'm going to talk about it a little bit more than the rest of the stuff that I'm going to talk about. Definitely check that movie out. It's definitely worth your time. If you aren't somewhat familiar with how the 2008 financial crash went, it might open your eyes a little bit. Might give you a chance to do a little more research, which is cool. So, but definitely check that movie out. Like I just mentioned, I did see The Hateful Eight over the Christmas holiday. A lot of people are going to worship this movie because it's done by Tarantino. I didn't feel the same way. I might save the Hateful Eight discussion for when I'm with Marvin. He and I both saw it. You know, he and I can probably benefit from a longer discussion about that movie along with Star Wars. And I know there are people that aren't liking this movie as much. I think the general audience is still going to love this movie because it's Tarantino, so it gives them an opportunity to sound like they're smart or know what they're talking about when it comes to movies when they talk about Tarantino. He's a brilliant filmmaker. He's a great writer. He knows how to set up a movie with his own personal film fandom, you know, steeped in movies that you've never heard of. And that's another thing I think I find irritating is that, you know, he gives you the, hey, have you ever seen this movie? This movie's great. Have you ever seen this? It's from 1944 and it was about this and this and that. No, you've never seen it. Don't worry about it. I feel like he has this pretentious attitude that he's seen a lot of these movies that no one else has seen. While other directors are talking about their influence from Kurosawa or John Ford or Godard, he's finding these blaxploitation or these movies that no one's really seen until now when Tarantino mentions it. That's when people seem to go back and really pay attention to it. If you're willing to offer up 3 hours of your time, there's a lot of good stuff in the first half. In the second half, it just becomes a bloodbath. I honestly feel like with Hateful Eight, he had Reservoir Dogs going for the first half of the movie, but he just couldn't help himself. And he just exploded it with, you know, fake blood. That was a real bummer. And also, if he cut an hour from that movie, I honestly feel like there's a lot of fat that could have been trimmed in that movie. If he trimmed a little bit of the fat, it would have been one of my favorite movies of the year. At this venture, it's not. I'm not a fanboy of Quentin Tarantino. You know, give me Paul Thomas Anderson, give me Charlie Kaufman, give me guys like that. I'll try and be their opening weekend. Tarantino, I don't think has been good since the 90s, or as good as everyone celebrates him to be. He did the best movie of the 1990s with Pulp Fiction. Me personally, I think Reservoir Dogs is better than Pulp Fiction, but there's no denying how important that movie was in the 90s. Everyone had that poster. Everyone saw that movie. Everyone read the script. I think after Jackie Brown with Kill Bill and Inglourious Basterds and Django Unchained and now Hateful Eight, I think there's just too many flaws in his writing. I think he just likes every word that he says so much that he wants to keep it in there. It doesn't seem like he has an editor and I'm sure that he does. There's no doubt that he does. But I feel like if the editor tells him that, well, why don't we cut this part and trim this part? You know, then you got to deal with the wrath of Quentin. You know, which the last thing you need is being headbutt by that big head. That's like squashing a watermelon with a fucking hammer. You got Gallagher here with Quentin Tarantino, just his head. There are parts, the performances, you know, the Tarantino-isms I feel like are there. Jennifer Jason Leigh is getting a lot of praise, and rightfully so. I thought she was good. But no one seems to be talking too much about Walton Goggins, who, if anyone's watched Justified while it was on, they know what Walton Goggins is capable of as an actor. And this movie, he did just that. I think he stole the show, and word was that the more they saw his performance, the more they gave him to do. And he deserved every minute of screen time. I'm a huge fan of Goggins. He pops up in everything. You know who I'm talking about. If you don't, you see a picture, you'll know who I'm talking about. He is a gem of an actor. He's great. And so he steals the show in The Hateful Eight, which is hard considering that Tarantino tries to steal it himself with his own words and ego. Yeah, go see Hateful Eight if you want. Like I said, it's gonna be a long movie, so enjoy what you see. From the big screen to the small screen, Nicole and I just started catching up with season 2 of Transparent, the award-winning, critically acclaimed Amazon series starring Jeffrey Tambor as a trans woman. The first season was outstanding. There's no doubt about that. The second season, we're only a few episodes in, but this show just succeeds so much on the story, the performances, the direction of showrunner Jill Soloway. She created the show based on her experiences with her own father when he came out and said that this is how he's always felt, this is who he's always been, and he transitioned into a woman. So I think having someone who doesn't have that long TV career, it's a testament to the show that it makes it as authentic and possible, probable. It feels real. These people feel like human beings. Hello, Clementine. They feel like human beings. They don't feel like characters on a show. Jeffrey Tambor's character starts living with his ex-wife, and his ex-wife has this sense that they're back together because he's moved out of their old house, when in actuality he's trying to move on, but he's stuck in this world that he doesn't want to be in. And there's this moment that closes out the show of just Jeffrey Tambor in front of a mirror at a trans club, looking upon himself and just having that moment of realization of who she is and what she's about. And it's breathtaking of a scene. It's just an emotional knockout scene that you can't help but just be proud of that person for finally knowing who they are. Another show that I've talked about on the Ramble On, You're the Worst, FXX, their comedy, dramedy I would call it more. But it's something that they succeeded in this past season, where you saw one of the characters going through and finally opening up to her feelings. Clinical depression is a real thing, and you saw the most practical treatment of her feelings, her emotions, her depression. It feels completely real. Like you're actually watching these people go through this. Now, sure, there's, comedic hijinks that's kind of intertwined into it because it's comedy. But even with the setup, payoff, whatever you want to call it, you still get the effect of watching human beings interact with each other. As much as, and Parks and Rec will always, forever and until the end of time where I find something better, will always be one of my favorite shows I've ever watched. And that's because of the sweet moments and the overall optimistic feelings that you get when watching that show. I feel like we've talked about Parks and Rec a lot on the Ramble On for good reason. But at the end of the day, I still recognize that it's a TV show. It's a TV show with characters. And yeah, there are those moments of humanity that you see between characters. But you don't get the sense that they are real people. Transparent, You're the Worst, to an extent, Louis, they portray people as human, as real. For the longest time, Breaking Bad did that with Walter White's ascent or descent, whichever way you see it. I think it kind of, not necessarily jumped the shark, but kind of jumped into pseudo-reality or fake reality, whatever you want to call it, when Gus Fring was blown away. Spoiler alert if you haven't watched the show yet. Come on, seriously, everyone wants to watch Breaking Bad at this point. When Gus Fring, Giancarlo Esposito's character, died, and he walks out with half of his face blown away, that kind of distorts reality a little too much. That's where a lot of people kind of go, oh, okay. It's a fantastic moment in television, but you still recognize that it's a little distorted. Transparent and Louis and You're the Worst, The Wire, obviously. The Wire was steeped in realism. If you read about it, some of the things that they did on screen or that they filmed, they kind of toned down what really happened. So yeah, there are shows that do succeed in that, and they are celebrated for that. Transparent is one of those shows. If you're not watching Transparent, I highly recommend it if you're willing to steep yourself into that culture. I think that's the thing with that, is that I do have a lot of gay lesbian friends. I think we all do. The trans culture is one that's very foreign to me. Not knowing anyone directly who's involved in that culture, the great thing about the show is it shines a light on something that I'm unfamiliar with. And by doing so, it's also giving me real human beings to attach to. The kids are completely irritating in their own right. They have problems, they have issues that are relatable to real life issues. That's another thing that just propels this show into something more than just a show about a guy who who finally goes through that change to be the woman that he feels like. You're the Worst is kind of that same thing. It's accepting that a woman might have these feelings that everything's at its worst. Those life freezing moments, even if it's not that big of a deal. That there's always going to be people that are going to, be there, that are going to stick by you and hold strong. They're going to get you through it. I mean, it's just the beauty of those shows. You can't help but just be filled with emotion in some capacity, be it to tears or just recognizing that these are real. That's the expertise, and what makes these shows so great is that they do accept that these are real issues, these are real problems, and we shouldn't just brush them under the rug. We have to treat them properly or treat them respectfully and be there even when someone might not be. Stick by the person that you love, even if nobody else wants to do that. I saw a commercial last week. I think it was on when I was watching Hulu. I saw a commercial last week that a young woman with cancer was being berated by her husband and her mother to just get over it. You know, get over your cancer. It's not that big of a deal. And the whole point of it was that you wouldn't say this to a cancer patient, so why would you say it to someone who's dealing with depression? And I think that's the great thing about You're the Worst, which is one of my favorite shows on TV right now, if I haven't said that before. But it just shines a light on an issue that a lot of people just don't understand. And these people that have these issues, they're not going to come out and freely say, I'm depressed, help me. You know, it's recognizing and being there, you know, or in transparent. It's accepting and supporting the mom papa. They're not fully comfortable yet in who they are. So who are they to completely write them off or push them away? And that's something that you can tell is definitely going to come up in the season. Jeffrey Tambor's family, his own extended family, is going to come up a lot more. So you'll get to see those people that might not accept him completely. So try and close this up. But there are a lot of movies that are coming out soon. There's a lot of good TV shows that are coming back. We just got the first teaser trailer for Daredevil, the Netflix show. Like I said, a lot of these big movies that are coming out, a lot more awards movies are going to be coming out. So if you're interested in those, I mean, you'll get a chance to see, those kind of films. Unless you want to see some, schlock about Benghazi by Michael Bay, then go see 13 Days coming out next week, or Ride Along with Ice Cube and Kevin Hart. Everyone needs a good laugh. Apparently I don't. If I need one, I'll go to TV. TV is where comedy is excelling. While some shows like Parks and Rec and Community, kind of Community, I guess, aren't really airing anymore. I mean, you get other comedies that are just knocking it out of the park. So take a second and look. There's a lot of good stuff out there. But I mean, at this point, let's wrap it up. Let's pull it together. Let's tie the string and say so long. This was the Ramble On. I am your host, Kevin. You just heard me ramble for a long time. I appreciate you tiding the terrors of my voice for that long. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode. It's something that I'm going to experiment with, because if I can't get my team together, then you're just going to get me. So cheers to the new year. Good luck. And I'll see you next time.